everyone, this is the Almost World Podcast. Bringing to you mind-blowing interviews with guests from all over the world. So settle down, relax, and enjoy the show. Oh yeah, by the way, if you like the podcast, please support Almo's World Podcast on Patreon. Your support is what helps the podcast improve more and more. Welcome to Almo's World Podcast. I'm with my friend Matthew. Hey man, can you introduce yourself?
Hi Elmo, my name is Matthew Sabatine. I am from Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania in the United States of America. And I am coming to you guys. It is now 3 p.m. where I live in the state of Pennsylvania. So have you ever heard of the state of Pennsylvania?
Definitely, man. Yeah.
Maybe you've heard of a particular large city called Pittsburgh. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, definitely. I watched a lot of Hollywood movies, so Pittsburgh always gets a mention.
Yeah, I've noticed that I've realized that a lot of people in other countries, they tend to really recognize the name Pittsburgh. So I always like to mention Pittsburgh. So I actually live not far from there. So.
Oh, cool. All right. So what do you do, bro?
So I am the author and editor of a blog called The Common Caveat. And for The Common Caveat, I identify as a secular humanist. And I like to investigate the supernatural claims, whether they come from cults, superstitions, pseudosciences, or mainstream organized religion in general. I'm a skeptic. And I like to investigate these things to see the extent to which they might or might not be true. But privately and personally, I do not see evidence for any divine beings, though I am open-minded to possibly changing my stance on that. So therefore, if I would ever find possible evidence for divine beings and the supernatural someday, I would like to report on that.
Okay, great. So let me ask you, man, why this specific topic in your blog? Why not something like cars or self-development? But why this?
I like that question. It's an interesting one. I guess my best answer to that is I do this because it relates going back to my earliest days as a child, being curious about the whole topic of God. I was raised in a fundamentalist evangelical Christian household. My parents taught me to literally interpret the Bible. My parents taught me to believe that the stories of the Bible are literally true. Those events literally took place. Everything from Jesus Christ's resurrection all the way back to the stories in Genesis, God creating the earth and the universe in 6 days, and then believing in Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and believing in the stories of Moses and leading the Israelites out of Egypt and Noah's Ark. My parents taught me to believe in all of that stuff literally. So as a child, my parents and I went to church every Sunday morning. We hardly ever missed. We were pretty consistent, and I was taught a lot about a literal hell or a literal eternal damnation where people go to suffer for their sins. And I was taught to believe that Jesus Christ is my Lord, Master, and Savior, who I have to accept in order to avoid eternal damnation. So I was a fundamentalist until I was about 20 years of age, and then At the age of 20, I started really doubting. I went to college. I discovered my fascination for psychology and sociology, and those two studies, along with philosophy too, really influenced me to be skeptical about just a lot of things that I hear and see from people, and religion in general, especially evangelical fundamentalist Christianity. That was one of the first things that I really started doubting, because I've never in my life have I ever seen anything supernatural or paranormal or anything that signals there being a world beyond our natural physical world. So I really, I grew up in the kind of church that taught about prophecies, believing in miraculous healing, people putting their hands on you, praying for you, and you experiencing healing, and right before people's eyes. I was taught to believe in stuff like that, but because I have never seen it, I was really uh, meant to. I was forced to realize that this stuff is probably not real. It's probably not true. Um, but however, to this day, I still hear stories from people who claim that they have seen miracles, they have experienced miracles, they have been healed from lethal, fatal diseases, cancer, things that really contradicted the doctor's prognoses. And these people have experienced what a lot of people would call a miracle. So, I mean, for all I know, maybe miracles are happening out there and I'm just not seeing them. But who really knows? But on an academic level, I have found a lot of these claims of miracles in the supernatural to be debunked or better explained through science and naturalism, and so that's why these are a lot of my primary motivations for seeking out this topic. And I don't know if you want me to continue on. I don't know if I answered your question adequately, but
Okay, but what is the end goal here for your blog? I can see where you're coming from here, right? You grew up; it was easier, it's your background, and so is it merely to educate, or do you have like a mission statement on your blog?
well, if you visit my blog called The Common Caveat, and first of all, I forgot to mention that I would like you to promote some things about me. That is, first of all, my blog called thecommoncaveat.com. You can also find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn. And you can find me on Instagram. Just search for, you can search for @thecommoncaveat on Instagram. You can search for my name, Matthew Sabatine, on LinkedIn. You can find the Common Caveat page and my personal Matthew Sabatine page on Facebook, and then you can also search for the Common Caveat on Twitter. So your question, you asked, like, what is the purpose of my blog, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I have three different approaches here that sum up my mission. My mission is education, primarily, for believers and non-believers, atheists and Christians, or theists in general. But I have three different approaches when I have three different approaches to this topic. Number one, I am seeking to do counter apologetics. And I'm seeking to persuade people against theism, or at least persuade people against any kind of theism that is intellectually, emotionally, and politically oppressive, or any kind of theism that flagrantly or openly lacks serious evidence. So that is approach number one. Approach number two. So I am seeking to also understand the neural cognitive, biological, historical, and evolutionary basis of religion and religious people. So, some things that become relevant here are why do religious people think and behave as they do? What goals do they have in mind? How are they trying to influence and change society? Things of that sort. So this approach is less of a counter-apologetics approach, and it seeks to merely understand religious cognition and behaviors rather than trying to persuade people to change. So, people who are theists, people who are Christians, who want to stay in their belief, they might benefit from that part of the education that I'm trying to offer. They might not be as interested in the counter apologetics. If they don't want anything from the counter apologetics, they can maybe benefit from my approach number 2. Then there is approach number 3, wherein I am trying to be on the lookout for any possible evidence for the divine, for the supernatural, the spiritual, or whatever otherworldliness that humans are begging and pleading to partake in. So this approach is purely neutral. I try to be very unbiased here, even though I fully acknowledge that I will always be biased in some way, just by being human. But with this third approach, I am trying to be unbiased.
The first one that you mentioned is that you are sort of, I wouldn't say targeting, but more of focusing on the, I guess, anti-intellectual sort of theism, right? Why do you think this is a danger, or why do you think this is a problem?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate that question. That's such an awesome question. So anti-intellectualism, I do believe it is a danger because it really shields people from being able to fulfill a basic need in life, and that is the basic need for understanding and clarity about what is happening around them, and the information that they're receiving from their environment and from their peers. Humans really cannot escape being curious. And if we ever try to prevent curiosity or stifle curiosity in people, it only ends up having a bad subsequent or later effect. And I think that is best exemplified in Christianity and religion when we see people who, as children, they're told not to question things. They're told to just follow and believe. When they use that mentality throughout their adolescence and grow and upbringing, they end up resenting it when they get old, like in their 20s, and they'll end up turning away from the Christian faith. And so even though I like to see some people turn away from the Christian faith sometimes, what I don't like to see is the resentfulness that results from people's experiences in anti-intellectual religion. So if you would ask me to make a distinction here, I'm glad you brought that up because I am especially against the anti-intellectual kind of religion and Christianity. I do think that is a huge enemy. It's much less of an enemy than, say, the other types of Christianity and religions that are very intellectual, and they are very academic. So I do have to have an appreciation for them.
Mm-hmm. All right. So it seems to me that secular humanism is, its overall goal is the maximum well-being of each individual in a collective society, right? Where everyone is happy, optimally, right? So if I can see, and I can also vouch that there are so many people in these types of religions or belief systems or faith who in the way you define it, that as an anti-intellectual, right, where they're actually better off, they live happier lives, they have stronger family ties. They work harder and have develop integrity. They overcome their struggles, maybe with vices and everything. So if it is the case that their faith actually benefits them from a secular humanist perspective, why you know bar it or hinder it?
So let me try to repeat back to you what I think you're saying. Secular people benefit from being secular
No, no.
through
I mean the like, let's say the an anti-intellectualist Christian, right?
okay.
If his anti-intellectual faith actually benefits him, but in the standard that secular humanists set, which is that their overall life and well-being is actually better when they're in their faith rather than not having the faith, right? So why would you hinder that?
Well, I'm still kind of having a bit of difficulty understanding what you're saying, and I think that might be because I think that there is no benefit at all to anti-intellectualism, aside from the fact that maybe anti-intellectualism can shield somebody from engaging with content, academic content that is troublesome for them. There are a lot of anti-intellectuals out there, maybe because they feel most comfortable in that position, and they're too scared to encounter anything that really makes them think, and to make them think critically and break down their cognitive walls that in which would allow them to make new cognitive schemas to understand the world in a different way. Because let's face it, when we face counter information, it's very uncomfortable. We experience cognitive dissonance when we're trying to hold two different contradictory views at once, and it becomes stressful to figure out how to reconcile things that we're seeing in the world. So maybe on that front there are people who they just feel better, more comfortable distancing themselves from intellectualism, and I think that's understandable. However, at the same time, I think that'll eventually backfire when they eventually face situations wherein they have to use some kind of education. They have to make some kind of educated decision, and the situation becomes increasingly stressful for them because they don't already have the education that they need to face down whatever obstacles in their way.
I think there are a huge number of university professors, lawyers, doctors, people in who are very educated, who are also in a belief system that you would define as anti-intellectualist, right? And if it's if they arrived in that faith by their own free will, right? And they in that by their own discovery and curiosity for the truth, that's where it took them, right? And so, do you have any data that shows that this is actually the case? That their faith, requires more than just, I guess, more from them, in the academic sense. Do you have data that shows that it actually hinders or shows that their life is worse off being faithful to their religion?
Okay, so I think what's going on here is you and I might have two different understandings of anti-intellectualism. So could you give me your understanding of anti-intellectualism?
Well, I would say more of like a fideistic belief system, right? Where their faith rises above of logic or very specific and detailed rationality, right?
Okay. So you used a very key term there, fideistic, which
Yeah.
is which is the whole that's the whole act or idea of making faith superior
Yeah.
to logic and reason. Um, you know what? I mean, I can see. I really don't have data on those particular people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Basically, at this point, all I can really do is imagine how they might feel.
Mm-hmm.
So, college professors, educators, whether they be law professors,
Mm-hmm.
or whoever in academia, if they are fideistic people, of course, I think we have to admit that they would only be the kind of people who are in religious universities, right? Do we ever find fideistic people
Yeah,
in?
I believe so. There are a lot in secular, and you got, just public universities, private. There are a lot of believers in who are in the, these staffs. I would say. Would you go as far as to say that on like 99% of university professors are atheists?
No, not 99%.
Yeah, or as
I
much, right? Or about that.
I mean, I think that there are a lot of college professors, lawyers,
Mm-hmm.
doctors. There are a lot of people in um, lofty professions and universities. There are a lot of people in those places that they have faith. They
Mm-hmm.
believe in a God. They believe in some kind of supernatural principle. For them, you know, I often don't find a lot of those people to be fideistic. I find them to be actually less dogmatic. I actually find them to be pretty intellectual.
Mm-hmm.
They
Okay.
find good ways to harmonize their faith with their intellect and their scientific research and their academia, which I'm not as opposed to that as I am opposed to just people in religion or in churches who just believe in dogma just for the sake of believing in dogma, and they never seek, they never question
Mm.
it, they never find any kind of data
But
or
that's the
facts.
thing, right? If academic professors or lawyers or people in very require very high education, in their jobs, this is guaranteed that they at least look into stuff before they actually believe the claims, right? If they can have fideistic beliefs, why can't the people from who aren't focused on these areas?
Like I said, I think that fideism is really hard to hold to if you are actively seeking information that could possibly expose you to ideas that contradict what you already believe.
Yeah,
And again, maybe
dissonance, you mean?
yeah, cognitive dissonance is something that I think a lot of fideists really try to avoid.
Would you
Dogmatism.
say that your own secular humanist worldview is not cognitive dissonant?
I experience cognitive dissonance on a regular basis. I
Mm-hmm.
actually I actually seek to expose myself to it because I'm trying to test my beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually, when I'm arguing against religious claims and spiritual claims, I try to really make sure that I'm framing it properly, that I'm not
Mm-hmm.
mischaracterizing it or strawmanning it. So, I mean, there are a lot of atheists out there um, who are wrong in their counterclaims against religion. So I try to be mindful of those pitfalls. So, I mean, cognitive dissonance is always uncomfortable. It always messes with your head. But if you get used to, if you learn how if you get very skilled
Mm-hmm.
at reconciling
Mm.
things, finding reconciliations for information that appears contradictory, then you can maybe get more comfortable with being uncomfortable in the cognitive dissonance.
Okay. So would you say that a secular humanist's worldview is less cognitively dissonant than a fideistic Christian's, or a believer?
Well, that's an interesting question. I can't say for sure. Because I can't say, I can't be too certain about how all secular humanists feel about that.
How about yours specifically? Just yours, because you do write a blog, right? That
Yeah.
criticizes and exposes the lack of intellectualism in these believers' worldviews, right? So just comparing, juxtaposing your worldview to theirs, like, would you say yours is less cognitively dissonant?
I'm not sure if it is less cognitively dissonant. I just feel like it's more coherent. It gives me,
Coherence. So, what's
yeah.
the difference between a coherent worldview and a non-cognitive
Well,
cognitive dissonant worldview?
if the worldview is coherent, that means it is logically and internally consistent with itself. However,
Mm,
you can always throw a wrench in there to make yourself question it, which, I mean,
okay,
I guess.
I'm confused with. It seems to me though that I guess coherence is parallel to cognitive. I guess being not cognitive, not having cognitive dissonance, right? Like, by how I would define cognitive dissonance is that you have beliefs and claims that do not contradict each other, which directly means that they are coherent. They correspond to everything that you would the evidence that's in front of you.
Okay, so maybe we should get like a clearer definition on cognitive
Exactly.
dissonance.
Yeah.
It is Cognitive dissonance is the perception of contradictory information. So it is not exactly the contradictory information itself.
But the
Relevant
perception,
item. What's that?
the perception, right?
It's about perception. Relevant items of information include a person's actions, feelings, ideas, beliefs, and values, and things in the environment. Cognitive dissonance is typically experienced as psychological stress when they participate in an action that goes against one or more of them. So, for instance, I will experience cognitive dissonance if I were to maybe say hit somebody while I don't believe in violence.
Yeah, more of like having double standard.
Yeah, I would say it's similar to that.
Yeah.
Coherence is very related to this, but it's relative to cognitive dissonance in the sense that it is opposite of being, well, kind of opposite.
Yeah, it's opposite. Yeah.
Well, being coherent means being internally and
Having no internal contradiction.
Yes, having no contradictions in your logic.
So would you say that the secular humanist's worldview is more coherent, or less cognitively dissonant than a fideistic believer?
I think secular humanism is more coherent and less cognitively dissonant. Well, no, okay, so I got to be careful how I say this. I think secular humanism is more coherent, but we can't say that secular humanism itself is cognitively dissonant, because the cognitive dissonance is experienced by the perceiver. So you can perceive secular humanism in such a way that makes you feel cognitively dissonant without making secular humanism itself cognitively dissonant. So you can the coherence or incoherence that you may find in secular humanism is going to be up to you. And the same rule really applies to religion and fideism.
I would say, to be more specific, then, like, I would say, I rephrase the question, right? Do you think that your version, right, your perception of a secular humanist's worldview is more coherent and less cognitively dissonant than a fideistic believer?
I do feel that way, yes.
Okay. All right.
Only because I cannot possibly consider myself a fideist in any way, because I don't agree with the definition of faith. I don't agree. Yeah, I don't agree with dogmas in religion. But you know what? My feelings and my understandings and my perceptions of secular humanism, they fluctuate on a regular basis based on incoming information and my encounters with other people.
It's constantly adapting and changing as you grow and learn more, right?
Right. I really think that secular humanism is about that. Secular humanism is about allowing the freedom and liberty to change and to adapt to things, to people.
So that means to say that your secular humanist worldview right now could be wrong once you intake new information. You were willing to accept that it might be actually not the truth.
Yeah, I could be wrong. Like I said earlier, I am open-minded to the possibility of a supernatural divine realm.
So you're agnostic about it.
Well, I have to say that I am an atheist because
but an agnostic atheist. Right?
I mean, I really can't nail down that label. It's hard to really lay down that.
Well, okay, like let me define it for you then. Like an agnostic atheist, is agnosticism part is in terms of knowledge, right? You don't know that if there is or there isn't a supernatural world out there, but you don't believe that there is a God out there. So that's the atheist part.
I don't believe that's right. I also don't know if there is or isn't.
Exactly. So that is actually an agnostic atheist, right? And that's cool.
But I always find myself saying that I don't believe because I don't see evidence. So, well, I guess I should say it's better to say that I lack because I don't see evidence for the supernatural. But I think it is fair and it is safe for me to say that I should be open-minded to the possibility of the supernatural and the divine realm.
Interesting.
Because it's quite possible that there is a world outside of my perception that is happening independent of me. I mean, for all I know, people out there really could be having near-death experiences and miracles, and God could be speaking to them, but I just don't know.
So you're a skeptic, right?
Yes, I'm a skeptic to the most intense degree. I'm trying to employ the.
Do you apply the same skepticism to secular humanism?
Well, I apply that same skepticism to particular secular humanists when.
How about your version of it? Like, do you apply it to your own worldview? That skepticism?
Yeah, I do. Okay. I try to examine my own claims and my own assumptions. I try to back up everything I say with data. It's just unfortunate that I have limitations in my perceptions. They have to be constantly updated.
Limitations. Like you're only human, right? I'm only human, right? And so we don't know everything. We're not omniscient, but you're welcome to receive new information, actually change your worldview because you actually might be wrong, and that's okay.
The problem is, I at this point I really don't know what would uproot my secular humanism and really make me believe in supernaturalism. I mean, I guess
But you would consider supernaturalism. You just won't believe it yet because you'd have no evidence for it.
That's right. I mean, and the more I find myself digging into science, the more I realize that, I mean, the more I feel like I'm getting entrenched in naturalism and secular humanism. So if you don't mind, I actually want to get into what particular sciences I use as inspiration and insight for judging claims and evidence. So I have four main sources of inspiration and insight, and they are general human biology, neuroscience, cognitive science, and psychology. That aside, putting that aside, I also like to use a little bit of chemistry, history, theology, and philosophy wherever they may be relevant. But the four that I mentioned are my main ones.
Interesting.
So
go for it.
Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind, I would like to discuss what I think are the five main themes in life that I think are the undercurrent of our behaviors and thoughts and lifestyles and choices and language and culture today.
Okay.
Now I have no way to exactly prove that this is the case. I don't have any exact scientific data about this. So everything that I'm about to say, a lot of it has just been based on years of discussing religion with strangers and close friends online, reading the Bible, reading theology, reading the theory of evolution.
It's your independent research.
Independent research, yes, which has been punctuated also by witnessing momentous, pivotal, destructive political events unfold in the past decade or two because of religion. So if you recall, back on September 11th of 2001, our nation faced a crisis. A huge, planes hit our twin towers in Washington, D.C. A lot of people witnessed this event on television, live on television, as well as people who were below the buildings. A lot of people died that day. And historians have noted that this catastrophic event has traumatized a lot of people. It has changed a lot of people's lives, especially those who were close to the accident, those who lost their loved ones. It really shook the whole nation. And that's primarily why we got the new atheist movement with Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Daniel Dennett and Christopher Hitchens. Okay. And so they really got people thinking harder about religion being not only untrue, but also dangerous. And I think in the past 20 years, they have left such a mark on our culture of all generations. And I, as the common caveat, I want to figure out where we're going with this, because I think at this point now, even though we are very, very opposed to extremism and fundamentalism, well, my country is, I feel like we're becoming less fundamentalist, less extremist, even though there are a lot of parts in the world where extremism and fundamentalism is still on the rise. We're trying to figure out how to respond to this, and I would like to be involved with adding responses to that. So I think that these five main themes, they have a relationship with extremism and fundamentalism and life in general: language, choices, culture. Theme number one is unexplained experiences. Some people claim to hear, see, or feel a paranormal or supernatural event. Whether it is negative, positive, or miraculous, the event usually changes the person's life for better or for worse. Some of my favorite examples are claims about ghosts, demons, or any kind of visitation from otherworldly beings. Near-death experiences are a pretty hot topic right now. Mystical experiences are another hot topic right now too. And mystical experiences are, I think they are pretty relevant to the onset of fundamentalism and extremism in somebody's life, especially in primitive cultures, But today we still got a little bit of primitiveness going on in people's lives. They're facing poverty, they're facing political catastrophes, and sometimes they become violent. Sometimes people who were sane at one time, they become insane because of a particular catastrophic event that happens to them, and they need an escape from the mainstream world. And that's when fundamentalism and extremism steps in for them and offers them certainty. So that's one example. So while other unexplained events may not be paranormal or supernatural, they can be catastrophic, life-changing, psychological, financial, or health-related in a way that changes how somebody sees himself or herself, the world, and other people, their future, and their past. What amazes me is how spiritual interpretations often get suffused or mixed with these unexplained experiences or events. So my goal in this is to offer naturalistic explanations as an alternative to the temptation to always assume a supernatural explanation. So if you don't have any more questions, I can move on to the other themes.
Let's say I accepted Lord Jesus Christ as my savior, and would you call that supernatural experience?
I would call that a mental event, a biological event. So something happened within your body and brain that was very unique and mysterious, and enlivening and life-changing to you.
But if
You
they
couldn't.
claim that the nature of them accepting the Lord Jesus Christ and changing them, saving their soul, and being born again isn't that supernatural experience, would you put it in that same category as ghosts and demons?
No, that's of a different nature, because I have been in the presence of a lot of people in my past who, supposedly accept Christ as their Lord, Master, and Savior. They said a prayer, they did penance, they prayed the rosary, they
Yeah.
engaged in some kind of ritual that made them feel different than before. I would not put that on the same level as ghosts and demons, because making claims about ghosts and demons,
But
that
making
gets heightened.
claims of the Holy Spirit changing your life, right, and actually working in you and speaking to you in God's own way, that's very supernatural.
Well, I would call that a mental event or a biological event. Something
Well,
is
they
happening
don't
in you.
see it that way though. They see it as actually God out there being, working in their lives. So it by nature, their understanding of that event, that mental event is, divine. It's supernatural, right? So
Right. For them it is supernatural, but for me it is not supernatural. I think that there is a naturalistic way, a psychobiological way to understand that. And I think that currently we don't fully understand that scientifically, but I think that the new emerging field of neurotheology will really help to shine light
So,
shine light on that.
so you're saying that it's actually part of how we evolved, that the process of salvation, it actually fits the bill, in our how our brains work, right? That
I think our brains have evolved. First of all, our brains have evolved imperfect. Evolution has
imperfectly.
not allowed us to see objective reality for what it is. So we have a lot of these holes in our understanding of things, and we often feel very helpless and vulnerable. And the way to make up for that vulnerability and helplessness is to invent a savior, somebody who can save us from ourselves, from the dangers around us, from the dangers beyond us.
Yeah. So in a way, like you're saying that our brain seems to be like having a savior shaped hole in its and how it works.
Yeah. Well, and
Okay.
I think yes, there is a savior shaped hole, but I got to be careful, because when I
Yeah.
say
Well, I'm
that,
not saying it's like it's meant to be. Like it was intentional. It's just how it's. That's just how it seems to be.
yeah, that is how it seems to be. It just so happens to be that that's how evolution worked it out. Even
Interesting.
though even though I don't think evolution has any kind of cognitive role. It
Of
doesn't have
course. Yeah.
it doesn't have intentions. It,
Yeah.
it
It's
doesn't have a
just.
plan.
Yeah. That's how evolution works, right?
Yes, evolution is unguided.
So
It
for the
just so
second, what would you?
Okay, so the second theme I think that is an undercurrent to all of our lives is this whole conversation about the nature of mind and consciousness. So there is this growing idea in various media and blogs that saying that physicalism or materialism is dead or outdated. And it is my suspicion that people want to replace physicalism or materialism with the idea that mind or consciousness, instead of matter and energy, are fundamental.
Panpsychism. Yeah.
Panpsychism, something like that, or idealism, dualism.
Mm.
Dualism was dead long ago, and idealism, as far as I can see, it's dead too. I mean, I know the idealists they'll disagree with me on that, and that's okay. But I suspect that there are people out there who want to replace the idea. Uh, they want to say that matter and energy is not the basis of all reality. Mind and consciousness is. So, and this discussion is very, very
Well, I wouldn't
important.
say it's dead though, because you just said that you would actually consider the possibility that there's a world out there. If it is actually, if idealism or dualism is dead, you would be certain for yourself, right, that there is no world
Well,
out there.
well, yeah, I do question if it really is dead. I'm wondering if maybe it is making a reemergence or a resurrection after a few hundred years, because there are a lot of people on YouTube and blog. They're
So it's not
advocating.
dead, right? Like if it's still, if so many
Well,
people still adhere to it, right? Then it's
well,
not dead.
I mean, it's quite possible that it seems like a lot of people are adhering to it, but who are these people exactly? Are they real scientists? Are they doctors? Are they professionals? I mean, I have found some professionals and doctors on YouTube arguing against.
Well, I could just Google a list of scientists, physicists who would actually agree that who adhere to some sort of panpsychist or idealist worldview, right?
Well, okay, so maybe you could find 100. Maybe you could find a list of 100 scientists and physicists and professionals who subscribe to some kind of non-materialist,
yeah.
non-materialist, non-physicalist worldview. However, I have to wonder if maybe the people who subscribe to the professionals who subscribe to physicalism and materialism, what if that list is in the million? You know what I mean? So millions versus
just
100.
just because there are many, majority doesn't mean they're right, though.
I agree. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because if there is a resurrection or reemergence of anti-physicalism and anti-materialism, that is something worth addressing. It's not a matter of, I'm not trying to use that as a ruler or a measure on deciding whether or not materialism and physicalism are true or false. Because it very well could be that the minority is right and the majority is wrong. But there tends to be, really a pull from the majority, like we tend to intuitively and instinctually think, what are the odds that the majority is right. We tend to feel instinctually that they are right.
Well,
so I mean,
I would say, if there are maybe hundreds or maybe even like 1,000, at least 1,000 physicists who are recognized in their field, who actually dive into this in their daily lives, in their long careers, who actually find idealism, even if they're just a minority, then I would say, non-physicalism would actually be a valid worldview, if they see it that way in an academic level.
If there is that number of non-physicalists out there, I'm interested in studying their work to see if they have any evidence.
Yeah, I would too.
The reason why I subscribe to materialism and physicalism is because it just seems very commonsensical, and it feels coherent to me. It seems coherent. It helps me to really make sense of the world. If I subscribe to a non-materialist, non-physicalist worldview, it becomes hard for me to really stay sane because I have less rules to follow.
Rules.
Well, yes, because there, without materialism and physicalism, there really are no boundaries and rules as to what I can believe and not believe. I mean,
why?
Well, because I feel like things like dualism and idealism and non-physicalism, those kinds of worldviews essentially state that, mind and consciousness are fundamental to all reality. What we think is real really could not be real. So everything that we see,
like if what is the definition of real, though? If from the start, my laptop here or my body or my life is substantially made of consciousness stuff, right? That would actually be reality. So what would be the difference if it's a naturalist one or a physical one?
I would define real as being anything that can be confirmed with 5 senses: taste, smell, touch, sight, sound. Because I don't, if I'm going to talk about what's in the world, I don't have anything else to depend on but that.
Well, when you say confirmed, I think you would mean like you can make testable predictions, make experiments, right? You can observe that, like and validate your hypothesis, right? And be at least fairly certain that this is how reality works, right? You know, your
Yeah.
empirical data, right? But
Yes.
I don't think that even that even so, even if it is, you know, made of consciousness and everything is substantially, you know, that you can still make testable predictions there, and it would be as real as if it was a physicalist world.
Well, I kind of don't know.
Mm.
Because if dualists and idealists are going to argue that we really don't understand consciousness and how it works, and if they agree that we can't really state what it is, then they can't tell me that consciousness and mind is the underpinning to all of reality. And you know, I have found some pretty simple definitions for consciousness, which is basically, it just boils down to awareness
Awareness.
awareness of self, awareness of what's happening in me, sentience, awareness of internal and external existence. You know, I mean, I realize that it remains puzzling and controversial, being at once the most familiar and most mysterious aspect of our lives. But
I'm curious though, right? Okay, so if you're a materialist, yeah,
okay,
then do you, and you're not a dualist,
right.
right? So what is consciousness exactly? What is the medium that this awareness, you know, where is it essentially? What is the vessel? I mean, like, if
I would say the vessel is the brain. The vessel the
well,
vessel
the brain is just an organ, right? It's just a bunch of meat, blood, you know, molecules, you know.
molecules,
Yeah,
chemicals,
yeah.
sensory events.
Mm,
It has awareness. So basically, awareness is just the state of being conscious of something. It is the ability to directly know and perceive, to feel, or to be aware of events.
mm,
Another definition describes it as a state wherein a subject is aware of some information when that information is directly available to bring to bear in the direction of a wide range of behavioral. So, you know, we have nerve cells that you know, facilitate this, that make this happen. You really can't have awareness without neurotransmitters, synapses, all of those events going on. You know, I mean, so many different chemicals within our brains and nervous systems really, really impact and change
mm,
how we pay attention, how we feel with our self-esteem. You know, noradrenaline, norepinephrine, oxytocin, a lot of these chemicals that really determine whether or not you're going to experience depression and anxiety. So, you know, I mean, and since these topics of depression and anxiety often turn very spiritual, you know, it becomes really relevant to the spiritual discussion to mention these chemicals. And in fact, I was doing a little bit of reading on noradrenaline and its effects on social behavior, intergroup relations, and moral decisions. Earlier, I got this from a 2016 study from the U.S. National Library of Medicine and National Institutes of Health. I took some notes, and you know, because I think this would be a good way to kind of segue into my next theme, because my next theme is about morality and good versus evil. Um, so noradrenaline, you know, has been reported. Um, you know, it impacts our basic emotions, which sway our attitudes directed at other races of people and conclusions about what is morally right and wrong. Your reasoning, working memory, categorization of stimuli, problem solving, self control, and risk taking behaviors can be impacted by basic emotions such as anger, fear, and happiness. There's a long history of research behind this, going back to the 1980s. So, um, Neuroadrenaline is nerve cells make it happen. Neuroadrenaline is a hormone and a neurotransmitter used in response to stress and low blood pressure. In 2016, NCBI reported that noradrenaline could be very important to emotional arousal in relation to higher order psychological processes leading to decision making. So if you've ever heard of the somatic marker hypothesis, it states that somatic states or bodily changes that are associated with emotions are triggered by your brain's ventromedial prefrontal cortex to influence your later decisions. If you ever search for the somatic marker hypothesis, you will find that experiments were tested while using the Iowa gambling task, during which real-life decision-making is supposed to be simulated on a computer screen using cards that represent rewards and penalties, enticing participants to try to win money. It was found that healthy participants were keen at using the good decks, while people with orbitofrontal cortex dysfunction kept choosing the bad decks, even when they were aware of their overall losses. Continuing. Healthy participants were shown to have reliable stress reactions to the bad decks that aided them in making right choices. Patients who had amygdala lesions did not have reliable physiological reactions to their losses caused by bad decks. People with ventromedial prefrontal cortex dysfunction were also shown to struggle in making right decisions. So understanding decision-making in light of the somatic marker hypothesis shows us that somatic states can impact and positively accommodate explicit responses and decisions. Now, saying all of this is really, it's in correlation to moral decisions, because it's pretty general about decisions. So this wasn't direct testing on moral happenings. But it's interesting to draw the correlations. You know, if noradrenaline is going to determine how you behave and how you choose while gambling, how does that affect your moral behaviors and choices in other situations? I mean, you could tie morality in there and argue that, you know, people gambling, it's a moral crisis, it's a moral issue for them if they're financially robbing themselves, and if their addiction to gambling is causing them to be unable to take care of their family, you know, we could easily incorporate morality in there.
Okay, when you define morality, can you be more specific as to the standard that you're using? You know, like what would when you say morality, there's sort of a good, right, and the bad, right? Or would you say that too?
Good versus the bad. Those are very simple terms.
Yeah, I'm using very layman's terms.
We can put it simply like that. I kind of don't mind that.
But how would you? How do you define morality?
The differentiation of intentions, decisions, and actions between those that are distinguished as proper or right and those that are improper or wrong.
Proper or right and improper or wrong. Interesting. So how do you know what's proper or right and improper or wrong?
Well, quite often I think we make a lot of those judgments based on intentions and other people's intentions as well as our own, and their decisions as well as our own, and their actions as well as our own. There's a lot of interplay between all of that. That takes place in conversation with ourselves and with other people.
So morality is basically essentially with only around intentionality, right? If you didn't intend anything, if there's no intention, then it's amoral, right? There's no morality involved in anything if there's no intention.
Well, maybe not. I don't know. That is something.
But that's how you define it, though, right? Like, more as you said, morality is the intention.
It is the differentiation of intention, decisions, and actions
from the right or the wrong or the proper or the improper. So it's a differentiation of intentions. So without the intentions, then there is no morality.
Well, without intentions, you still have decisions and actions. You could arguably say that somebody
You can have decisions and actions without intention.
well, let's define intentions. So we assume that when somebody employs intention, they had maybe free will in the act.
Do you believe that people have free will?
I think free will is an oversimplistic concept, but let me go further with defining intention. So intention involves a commitment to executing an action in the future. So intention involves a lot of planning, premeditation, a cost-benefit analysis, I guess you could say, really thinking about consequences. So when we see that somebody decides to murder another person, we think to ourselves, did he or she not consider the consequences of doing this? And it really befuddles us as to how somebody could murder another person. Because if you're a very empathetic person, it's really hard to identify with a murderer who essentially lost their empathy in the premeditation stages leading up to the murder and then doing the murder itself. This is why the psychobiology of murder in general is still very understudied. It's still very mysterious, which I understand why people appeal to religion on this. Even though I disagree with people on boiling it all down to just,
okay. So what I'm noticing here though, Matthew, is that you're sort of giving a finding or looking for a scientific explanation for why we actually value people's intentions in our criminal justice system.
And I do have to,
isn't that a bit of special pleading though? Like maybe it's just the case that it's just a brute fact, that it's just is that society holds these values.
A brute fact. I mean, it's very factual that people perceive murder to be morally wrong.
Yeah.
But to label it as pure evil, that gets complicated because murders have occurred throughout history for various reasons, and easily reasonable people could find ways to convincingly justify a murder or a killing. We easily do that with war. Nobody really bats an eyelash at going to war with another tribe or people that they think is wrong or dangerous.
So I think your method here, in finding out why we hold intentions valuable in our justice system, is that you sort of reverse engineering it, and finding reasons biologically, psychologically, why we actually have this, and why we act in this certain way.
I mean, let's face it. I think just about anybody in this world has the potential to murder another person, and I don't think it has anything to do with spirituality. There's nothing essentially demonic or angelic behind it.
In the end, though, if you are right, that this is the case, that our biology, definitely, or psychology definitely led us to valuing intentions in this way. Like, what is the cause of this? I think the end result of your research will be we just evolved in this way.
Yeah, we evolved this way, and it is culture that has imbued us with particular social valuations.
Definitely.
We are conditioned by culture to judge certain moral or immoral actions in certain ways, and I think we're often very motivated by culture, in our culture, to seek for validation. So, I mean, if you just ponder for the fact that say for instance, if you decide to define or understand murder in a particular way that your people do not agree with, you're going to feel awkward. You're going to feel embarrassed. You're going to feel socially devalued. you're going to feel the urge to change your opinion so that you can be in better agreement with your people around you, because number one, you need them to trust you. Number two, your neurobiology, the health of your neurobiology heavily depends on social validation from your peers. And just number three, I mean, I don't know if there's a number three. I mean, I could go on thinking about a bunch of other reasons, but I think you get my point that you know, the sensitivity of the topic of murder, it's really important for us to view it in the right way, so that we can better deal with it, better deal with the issue as a society. And I think viewing it from a religious standpoint that basically just tries to label murder or any kind of moral or immoral action, or like, things cannot just be boiled down to pure evil or pure good. It's things are very gray.
Well, how about this, right? Like, let's say I would, there's a man that murdered millions of babies, cold-blooded. Would you say that that's a gray area?
No, it's not
pure evil,
it's not a gray
right?
area.
But I
It's
guess
not a gray area. What's that?
Would you say it's absolutely evil, that, or maybe that you would, or would you also might consider that there might have been a reason that the man that actually or why a man did that, and that would validate his actions?
Well, first of all, that whole event is catastrophic and emotionally jarring. It's emotionally disgusting, regardless of what his intentions were. But how I would judge him and say how he should be punished, I would want to investigate. I would want to investigate why he did it. Did somebody force him to do it? Was like what was the case?
So what would happen here though is like if he was forced to do it, right? Then there would be a greater evil and the lesser evil, or maybe an actual good in that situation, right? Like he could have not done it himself, or prefer the consequences, right?
Well, I mean, looking into why he did it, if he was forced to do it, I would question who or what forced him to do it. And once we identify that, it would be better to nail down that cause and make sure that cause never happens again.
I see. So you would just address the issue without really judging whether or not that action was fully evil, or I guess wrong or improper.
Well, then I would try to judge him and ask, was there something else that he could have done to avoid killing the babies? And why didn't he choose the better option? What is the most reasonable explanation? Did he have some kind of disruption in his brain?
So you would sort of just if that catastrophic event did occur, you would simply postpone judgment, right? And let's not let's stop and take a look, if this act is actually evil or not, right? Or if this man's intention is evil or not.
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, no matter how we judge him, he's going to go to jail.
Of course.
Considering how our current society operates and how they judge murderers. If he is proven to be guilty of murdering babies, he's going to be going to jail.
So I guess like judging whether or not that man's actions are evil or if you are going to postpone judgment on it, like your judgment is irrelevant as long as society will have the upper hand and actually achieve its societal justice, right?
Well, my judgment in deciding what should happen to him would be irrelevant because I'm not a professional judge. I'm not involved with legal law and how to I'm not involved with how we should punish people. But This is a really interesting topic, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something. These moral issues are things that I would like to spend the rest of my life
Yeah.
really philosophically and psychologically studying and thinking about, because I think that even stuff like this, even the most egregious, disgusting
Mm-hmm.
acts
Mm-hmm.
imaginable, we cannot boil them down to just pure evil, because
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that confuses the issue. If we just start throwing the pure evil label onto things, we never end up figuring out the
Mm-hmm.
true causes, why people do the things the way that they do, how do they do them.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we can
Yeah, I see.
understand the neurobiology, the biology and the psychology of these things, we can better develop ways to prevent them from happening. Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um,
And
am I making sense?
yeah, yeah, that I see your point there. Yeah, like we just can't do it out of out of just irrational or irrational reasons, right? It is emotionally uh disgusting and gross, and no one that should never happen, that those cases, right?
Well,
So
I definitely agree that the killing of babies, the murdering of babies, that should never happen.
yeah,
It it
but
does
in
disgust
terms
me.
of like labeling it as pure evil, you wouldn't go that far to,
Well,
right?
it's hard to label it as pure evil, because there's a cause and effect in everything.
So
You know, I
would
mean,
there be a scenario where that man's action would be justified? Like, would there be an actual scenario if in terms of possibilities? Let's say that the trolley problem, right? Like if
I was just about to say.
yeah, like you could choose to kill one man for the sake of five lives, right? But so these certain scenarios, there is actually no good alternatives. Yeah, but so but would you say then that like killing a man would be justified to save five people, right?
Well, I mean,
Yeah, so
I
I would
feel
say, like, I would go as far as to say, if from my perspective, that both actions are wrong, right? They're immoral, and killing someone or like sacrificing someone's lives for the sake of others, and even because even it is just wrong, like it's immoral to do that. But we have.
I would say it would be immoral to ever put a person in that situation to begin with, wherein they have to decide between one life versus five lives.
Exactly. But if you put someone in that position, right? Yeah, of course that would be an immoral action, but they would have to have the choice, to make two immoral choices, but with different outcomes.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Matthew, it's been a long conversation with you, man. It's I will almost an hour. And one last question, man. Like I want to get a clearer picture of of your secular humanism, right? Can you dive into that, and then we can sort of wrap the show up. And I've loved this, man. Like it's a breath
Okay.
of fresh air.
Yeah, I really hope I answered your questions well. I was kind of nervous with that last one, talking about murder, because it's a mysterious thing. I struggle with it, philosophically on a regular basis, understanding. I just know that I never want to kill or hurt anybody,
Of
ever.
course, yeah, yeah.
So my version of secular humanism. My version of secular humanism is about being able to have the freedom to reason and moralize independently from dogmas from religion. To be able to envision a scientific future that allows for things that really push the boundaries, so that we can improve humanity's lot in life, or humanity's condition, so that we can minimize disgusting, egregious things like murder and the killing of babies and thievery and whatever disgusting, egregious thing you can think of. My hope and my hope and my desire is to see that science can really shine the light on in the darkness of these things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I wish to see. I advocate for the kind of secular humanism that says, you know, we shouldn't keep ourselves enshrouded in ignorance, and I feel like there are certain things from religion that we could really get rid of that would allow us to you know, minimize the ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we can get rid of religion completely, because I do think that there are a lot of people out there who heavily depend on it. They need it. They really can't live without it. And you can't push them to think otherwise. And I don't like trying to convert anybody who doesn't want to be converted. So I'm trying to convert the people who are curious, who are looking for something to replace the religion that is oppressing them and causing them to do questionable things, or think questionable things, or believe questionable things.
Mm-hmm.
So my kind of secular humanism is very, I try to be very humane, and I'm all about trying to maximize people's happiness and well-being. So what kind of philosophy can I promote that will maximize people's happiness and well-being? What can we do better to avoid murder and mayhem and you know, violence and vandalism and malfeasance and corruption? What can we do to really minimize these things?
I see. And yeah, I actually had a guest yesterday, and he had a YouTube channel about that criticizes cults specifically, because the cults, religious cults, political or any sort of cultish groups, they have these symptoms as well of of oppressing individuals, taking advantage of their ignorance, right? And I really believe that if we spread critical thinking, and providing the people who are curious enough to question their own beliefs, right, and give them the ammunition enough to actually help themselves. And I really love people who take time off their day to promote this, right? Critical thinking, a good healthy skepticism. And the common caveat, guys, if you're listening, check out Matthew has a lot of articles there that you definitely find interesting, right? And Matthew, thank you so much for being on the show, man. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Elmo. Again, my name is Matthew Sabatine of The Common Caveat. Please check me out, and it was a pleasure being with you, Elmo.
So that's the end of it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is your host, Elmo Ador Jr., and thank you for listening in, and please subscribe. Please follow us on Facebook. Please follow this. Please. Thanks.